So, Dr. Ban, we know that here in central Indiana, just yesterday, folks in hospitals, frontline workers starting to receive the first doses of a COVID-19 vaccine. And we know that the next steps are going to start rolling as we go through the weeks. How are you guys at Walgreens preparing to help administer this vaccine as more people are able to receive it?
Right, Lauren. So we have been working with the CDC, HHS, and Operation Warp Speed really from the beginning of all this. And we know now that over the weekend, as you mentioned, the vaccine shipped and the allocations have been received by the states. The first part of this process will be to address the people who are on the front lines of the pandemic. And those are the healthcare workers who already, as you mentioned, beginning to get their vaccines. Now, Walgreens is supporting that effort across the country as well. Next week, we're going to start our vaccine program in long-term care facilities where we will be vaccinating not only the residents, but also the employees who work there.
Very cool. And so can you talk to me about who will receive the vaccines as part of this phase one of the distribution? You mentioned the long-term care facilities. Is that your primary focus?
Yeah, the primary focus. Now, this all comes from the CDC. They offered guidelines to the states. Then the vaccine gets allocated to the states. And really, the states have the autonomy to decide where it goes, but most of them are following CDC guidance. And again, the first phase, in what we're calling phase 1A, will address, or we will be giving vaccine to the people at the front lines, the healthcare workers, and then also people living in long-term care facilities. That's kind of a fancy way of saying nursing homes, and their employees. So that'll be the first phase. And then we'll start in the phase 1B, we'll start to broaden, and you can expect that likely essential workers will be in that, people with chronic medical problems will be in that. Now, general population won't happen immediately. We're still a few months away from the general population being able to get vaccinated, but that could start as soon as the end of March, the beginning of April.
And so for someone who's receiving a vaccine, what does that look like in terms of like safety and getting, we know, a second dose, like the Pfizer vaccine, we know that you guys are working with, you have to get that second dose. So what is that all going to look like for people?
Right. I'll take a step back here and say that Walgreens has a deep tradition of being able to vaccinate the country. Our program has been in place for about 15 years. Over the course of the last 5 years, we've performed over 150,000 flu clinics, very similar to these COVID clinics across the country. We've done that efficiently and safely. So we feel like we really have the infrastructure that we need, not only, but we also worked with the federal government in 2009 to address the H1N1 flu pandemic, where we were able to distribute and then administer a vaccine. So we feel very comfortable that we're ready and have all of the infrastructure that we need. Not only, we've got these pharmacists that people just respect and who they trust. And so again, think of this almost like a relay race. You know, it started with the scientists, then the manufacturers, now we had the distribution out to the states, and now Walgreens is gonna pick up that baton, and we're gonna get across the finish line here, and we think we can do that because we have such deep infrastructure.
Awesome. And in terms of the getting a second dose, what will that look like, and how will people, how are you guys going to keep track of when people are ready for that second dose?
Of course. So in that infrastructure that I mentioned, not only do we have the protocols and the processes to administer the vaccine, but we also have all of the technology so that we can be in communication with patients. So it starts out really basic. When you get your vaccine, you'll get a card telling you when you need the next vaccine. And then we'll leverage text, email, we'll even call people to make sure that they get that second shot. It's fundamentally important that you get both shots. Lastly, if the patient has a primary medical doctor, we will close the loop with the primary medical doctor. So all of that technology infrastructure exists, and we will lean into it here.
Awesome. And in terms of cold storage solutions, we know these vaccines have to be kept at a really cold temperature. So how are you guys at Walgreens working to ensure that the vaccines are at the proper storage temperature?
As I mentioned, we've been working closely with Operation Warp Speed from the beginning. We were aware that this would be the case, and so we have been able to handle this by having sites across the country that can receive the vaccine. In some of them, we have refrigerators that are ultra cold freezers, actually, that can hold on to that. And then in other hubs, we're using dry ice. But what we've been able to do is make sure that the vaccine stays stable in terms of temperature throughout the entire distribution, so that when it arrives at the site for administration, it's at the perfect temperature.
And in terms of cost, we know that's something Hoosiers here are looking towards. Is this going to be free for people who receive this vaccine?
The federal government purchased this vaccine both from Pfizer and Moderna. I should also mention also from AstraZeneca and from J&J, which we expect to be reviewed for emergency use authorization in the beginning of 2021. The federal government paid for all of this vaccine. So for anyone who's eligible, the vaccine will be free.
Lastly, can you just talk to people here in Central Indiana about this vaccine and the safety of it? What do you encourage them to do when they're able to get the shot?
Yeah, so I'll unpack that a little bit for you. You can imagine, as the chief medical officer of Walgreens, but even as a husband and father and son, I've given this a lot of thought. I have followed this process all the way through. The checkpoints around effectiveness, but more importantly, safety, have been met. The data has been looked over with deep scrutiny. I feel very confident that this is a safe vaccine. My recommendation, mostly I want people to be educated around it so they can make a good decision for themselves. I'll say it in a different way, Lauren. I intend, when I'm eligible, to get this vaccine.
Excellent. Well, Dr. Van, thank you so much for making time to talk with us today, and appreciate the work that you guys do at Walgreens on this project and rolling out this vaccine.
Thank you.